damo.
Podjetjem, da bomo včasih težave s tehnologijo.
Tako, da ne ideš dol, nego da stojiš. To je to. Ćemo staviti stolice, piše mikrofone. Mi bomo gledali samo ena stvar, a ne uporabljati mikrofone, ali pa hoče lahko to zelo. Super, da je ok, bomo nobene zarepali. Samo minutko, da gremo še čez protokol in potem štartamo right away. You present here. Okay, just stay in front of the mics. Like that, sit down, Laura stands up, presents in front of the mics. We'll have Q&A. And for the Q&A session, we'll just go to the mics, so you'll be both on the same side with the mic. And that's
We're going to hold microphones or no? I think this group is small.
A bi šel vsem brez mikrofona? Moje fantje je močan pa globok glas. Kaj pravite?
Lahko pa dajmo začeti, ja.
Ok. A lahko naredimo eno probo? Guys, can you say a couple of things? So that...
Can everyone hear us? You guys can hear us okay? We haven't said anything yet.
Take that. This is yours. Okay.
Najlepša hvala, da ste prišli. Lepo pozdravljeni na Uberjevi tiskovni konferenci v Ljubljani. To je naša prva tiskovna konferenca v tem našem lepem mestu, zagotovo pa ni zadnja. In se vam zato izjemno zahvaljujemo za vašo udeležbo in za vso pozornost, ki nam jo namenjate v zadnjih tednih in mesecih. Cilj današnje novinarske konference je zelo enostaven. Želimo vam razložiti, kaj Uber je, kaj Uber ni in kakšni so naši načrti v regiji, še posebej pa seveda pri nas v Sloveniji. Moje ime je Marek Boris Andrijanič in sem del ekipe, ki skrbi za public policy v srednji in vzhodni Evropi. Z vami pa bosta danes kolega Robi Kazen, ki je regionalni direktor Uberja za srednjo in vzhodno Evropo, in pa kolega Davor Kemac, ki je prišel iz Zagreba, kjer vodi kot direktor jugovzhodne Evrope našo regijo. Današnja tiskovna konferenca bo razdeljena na dva dela. V prvem delu bosta Robi in Davor predstavila Uber oziroma šla čez predstavitev teh osnovnih stvari, ne samo kar se tiče Uberja na globalni ravni, ampak tudi na regionalni in slovenski ravni. Potem pa bo na koncu tudi čas za vaša vprašanja, za katera se vam že vnaprej zahvaljujem. Ukolikor bo posebna želja, boste oba tudi na voljo kasneje za posamezne intervjuje. To je to, še enkrat se vam opravičujem za zamudo in vas po današnji konferenci vabim na prijeten klepet in druženje ob kavi in piškotki v prostoru pred to dvorano. Najlepša hvala še enkrat, sedaj pa predajam besedo Robiju, našemu regionalnemu direktorju za srednjo in vzhodno Evropo. Najlepša hvala. Robi, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Mark, and welcome everybody to Uber's first press conference in Ljubljana. Extremely excited to be here. As my colleague Mark said, my name is Rob. I'm the general manager for Uber in Central and Eastern Europe. And over the next 10 to 20 minutes, I'll take you through an overview of Uber's operations in Europe, our vision for cities, and our vision for one day operating in this great capital of Ljubljana. first, if I could get a raise of hands, has anyone here used Uber before, perhaps in another European capital or somewhere else in the world? A few people have tried it. I'd love to tell you about the basics of Uber, and at its core, Uber is probably the simplest smartphone application that's been developed in the last decade. In 2012, our CEO, Travis Kalanick, and co-founder, Gerrit Kamp, took a trip to Le Web, a very prominent technology conference in Paris, and they experienced something that most tourists in most European capitals have experienced, or any capital for that matter. They got stuck in a rainstorm and they were unable to hail a taxi. So standing in the rain in 2012 at the Eiffel Tower, what did they say? They said, wouldn't it be amazing if there was a smartphone application on your phone which could request a car on demand through your smartphone without having to wave on the street for a taxi, without having to pay cash, and as a foreigner, being able to interact with that driver in your own language. And that's how Uber was born, this concept that seems so basic today, but was so revolutionary at the time, of push a button and get a ride. And that's exactly what Uber is, and that's exactly what we've developed over the last 5 years. Fast forward to 2016 and today, Uber is a global phenomenon. We have been embraced by tens, hundreds of millions of people around the world. We are now active in over 500 cities around the world, 80 countries, 21 countries in the EU, and we've facilitated over 2 billion rides since our company has been started around the globe at the highest level of customer service and quality that users have ever seen before. In Europe, our footprint has expanded very, very quickly. Since our initial launch in 2012 and 2013 in Western European capitals, we've brought Uber to the masses in 21 countries in the EU, including great capitals in Central and Eastern Europe: Vienna, Bratislava, Prague, Warsaw, Bucharest. And the experience, while unique in each city, has been largely the same. Users have been drawn to Uber's simplicity, to the safety of the service, to the high quality of the drivers that are providing the transportation, and they've adapted this service in droves. And we hope one day, in the near future, to bring this great service to the citizens of Slovenia and Ljubljana. Now, I know some of you mentioned you've tried Uber, but I think it's worth walking through how basic the service is and what the benefits are in terms of riders, drivers in the cities that we operate in. And the good news is that it's extremely simple, and I encourage you after this to open your application, toggle to a city in Europe where we're active. There are many of them, and see what the experience is like. You can interact with the application just here on your smartphone, sitting in Slovenia. The smartphone app allows you to request a car. When you open the application, this is what you see first: a map of the city that you're in. You are automatically located not only in the city, but on the specific street and the specific location that you're standing, and you have the opportunity to request a car. When you request a car, a nearby driver receives a request to come pick you up, and we allocate this request through technology and very sophisticated algorithms which pair you with the closest possible driver to you to ensure that you wait the least amount of time to get picked up. When the rider is matched with the driver, you see very useful information about the partner: where the driver is, how long it will take them to come pick you up, and what the make, model, and vehicle is that will be picking you up, and the name of the driver. You can also obtain a fare estimate. One thing that many visitors in cities they've never been to wonders: how much will it cost me to travel from the airport to the train station, or the train station to my hotel? And the good news is that with the Uber application, this takes seconds. You simply enter in your destination, and you can request a fare estimate, or our application will provide you with a quote in real time on the spot. The magic really starts once you're in the car. You're now in the vehicle, you're sitting in the back seat, and you're enjoying a great ride. The GPS system removes any possible opportunity for the driver to get lost or to take an inefficient route. Through the application that the driver uses, we provide GPS directions to the most efficient way to get through their route, and the entire trip is tracked through GPS, meaning that at all times our systems are recording where the trip is going, how long it's taking, and how much it's costing, which means that for a rider, you don't have to worry about much when you're sitting in the back seat. At the end of the trip, The app calculates the route automatically. There's no discussion about fare. There's no discussion about what the agreed upon rate was. The driver simply ends the trip when they reach their destination. The fare is calculated automatically, and it is debited from the rider's credit card and automatically paid directly to the driver's bank account. This seamless experience that marries technology with the human interaction that's existed in our cities for hundreds of years is transforming the way that people are getting around cities in Europe and is really bringing magic to the masses. And one feature that we've also introduced, which many of you may have used or certainly would appreciate, is the feature of fare split. If you've ever been in a taxi late at night with a group of friends coming home and you're debating or wondering how will you split up the cost of the trip, not unsimilar or unlike being at a large dinner party, Uber can facilitate that. You can enter up to 3 to 4 additional passengers to share the cost of your trip. They will automatically receive a request, and the cost of the trip will be evenly distributed across all the participants. After the trip, we're bringing the highest level of transparency and documentation to anything you might wonder about your trip once it's completed. At the end of the trip, the rider rates their driver on a scale from 1 to 5. This is the hallmark of the Uber system. This is really what set us apart when our company was first launched. And it set a precedent which shows that we look at data on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, to evaluate how the partners on the platform are doing, how satisfied users are, and ensuring that you're always getting picked up and having the highest quality experience. In Zagreb, for example, where we've been operational for a year, we have an average partner rating of 4.8 out of 5 stars, the equivalent of 96%, which is one of the highest ratings in Europe. The passenger also receives an electronic receipt directly to their email the moment the trip ends, which means that even once your trip ends, if you have questions about the driver, the route that you took, or the cost of the trip, all of this is laid out very clearly in a nice, pretty email which you'll receive in your inbox and can reference. If you have questions about that trip, about the fare, or about the route that your driver took, you can simply reply to it or ask us a question via our application, and we will deliver the best customer service people have ever seen in the transportation industry. Today in Europe and around the world, we are solving customer support questions, the few ones that we do get, in less than 24 hours with a greater than 85% level of satisfaction. These are some of the key features that are the hallmark of the Uber service, whether you're using it in Vienna or San Francisco or Rio or hopefully one day Ljubljana. This experience is consistent for all riders everywhere in the world, which means that if you register for Uber one day in Slovenia and you travel to Japan or another city, or for example, visitors come here, they can use the application and have access to all of these features in their local language with their local credit card here in Slovenia, which is something that's really amazing, as I mentioned, as a tourist. When you're traveling around, you don't necessarily know your way around, you don't speak the local language, and these benefits are really special. The question that we often get is, who are these amazing partners that are delivering this amazing service? And Uber is a technology platform. We don't employ riders, we don't employ drivers, we don't bring cars to cities. We are a technology platform that enables an amazing marketplace, leveraging assets and employees and people who already live in the cities that we're operating in. The partners, for the most part in Uber, in Europe, are fully licensed transportation providers, which is what they would be should we launch in Slovenia. The partners on the system, before they have the opportunity to get in a car or drive one of our passengers, come into our training center and they meet with our staff to understand what the platform is all about, how it works, and receive a short training. They demonstrate to us through proof of physical legal documents that they are who they say they are by giving us things like a driver's license, a concession which demonstrates that they are legally licensed by the state to provide transportation services. They provide us with proof of VAT and tax registrations, which show that they have the necessary business registration to sell services in the country that they're operating in. They also bring us things, common sense things that we look for in every city, like a criminal background check, a driving record check, to demonstrate that not only is this person or this company or this individual able to provide these services in the country that we're operating in, but that they can do so by demonstrating a track record of safe driving and a clean background check. They also prove that they have a valid insurance policy, which ensures that should something happen on the trip, that they have local, legally compliant insurance that will cover the rider in the event that that happens. In the case of Slovenia, should we one day launch here, Uber partners would provide service as private hire drivers. This means that those partners are licensed by the state to provide pickup and drop-off services for passengers and have an appropriate concession to do so in that country. The benefit for partners is enormous, and we've seen millions of people and companies embrace Uber as a source of incremental income and revenue generating opportunities, not necessarily unlike many other companies in this industry, whether it's been eBay or Amazon that have created marketplaces. And they love the flexibility of Uber. There is no fixed cost. There are no subscription fees. There are no major upfront investments required. Partners, provided that they meet these requirements, can start driving on the Uber platform immediately. They can bring on several drivers, they can bring on fleets of vehicles, and they can start earning money as quickly as they're ready. And it's this flexibility that has helped Uber deliver this experience to riders en masse around the globe. In Croatia, to give you a sense of scale for how many people are interested in doing this, we are receiving over 500 applications a month from both individuals, sole entrepreneurs, and business entities and transportation companies which wish to use and provide their services on the Uber platform. We're often asked how we pick cities. And I always like to say that at Uber, we don't pick cities, they pick us. And the benefit of our technology platform is that we measure data and we look at data to drive not only the great service that we provide to riders and drivers, but also to make smart business decisions to serve cities that need us the most and where we can add the most value. This is a chart of what we call eyeballs in Ljubljana, showing how many people have opened the Uber application and are interested in using it. And this is a great guide for us, and we've used it as a guide over the last several years to expand our service. In Croatia, before launch, we saw 13,000 people open the Uber application and said, wow, this is a market that really wants Uber. It's a market that really needs Uber, and we worked hard to make that happen last year. Today in Slovenia, we see a similar demand. We see a similar trend. 17,000 people have opened the Uber application here. They are emailing us, they're contacting us online, and they're asking us when we're launching. This, to us, is a great indication of the potential opportunity that there is to bring this mobility solution to the city of Ljubljana. Now, when it comes to Slovenia, and I know many of you are here excited about what this means for the future of Uber here, and obviously we're not yet operational here, our intention and our hope is to one day launch UberX, the service that I spoke about earlier. It's a fully licensed, legally compliant transportation service which partners with transportation providers with private hire concessions and using the Uber application in a city like Ljubljana. Our hope is to bring this great service to Ljubljana one day, and the opportunity to do that will come through the adoption of smart regulations, which follow the trend of the European Commission and a wave of reform we've seen across Europe over the last 6 to 12 months of countries adopting this agenda and recognizing the role that services like Uber can play in the collaborative economy. We've already seen a number of countries, Estonia, Lithuania, Slovakia, potentially Croatia. We see many countries recognizing the opportunity of these services and moving to modernize regulation and create frameworks for passenger transportation using the Uber application. This is what will be required for Uber to launch here, and we are really hopeful to have that opportunity one day in Slovenia. As the global leader in mobility solutions today and active in over 500 cities, Uber has played a key role in the industry around the globe and in Europe in bringing this type of solution to the masses. And we know that, and we've learned that, innovation outpaces regulation. It's often that new services are developed before regulation exists to recognize them and facilitate them in a safe and transparent manner. And that's why Uber is committed to being a constructive and active part of the dialogue. One, what are the benefits of these services in terms of ease of use, safety, and transparency for consumers, bringing the cost down of getting around cities, and also in creating new economic opportunities for individuals and transportation companies. We hope to, and we expect, and I think we already are a part of that dialogue here today in Slovenia, and we are hopeful about a potential launch in the future. That could be our UberX service, and that's what we would expect it would be, but also potentially to do something much more exciting, which would be launching a first of its kind pilot in the city of Ljubljana, providing people with exclusive access to a fleet of electric cars. This would enable the city of Ljubljana, which has a fleet of electric vehicles, as well as many other individuals and private companies, to provide people with unparalleled access to an electric fleet of vehicles, which I think further underscores how Uber can help bring Ljubljana and Slovenia into the 21st century when it comes to green mobility solutions. So that's what I've got here for you today. I'd love to pass the microphone over to my colleague Davor, who's the general manager for Croatia, to have him tell you a little bit about our experience there and what that can tell you about Uber and the potential here in Slovenia.
Thanks, Robbie.
Dobar dan svima. I'm Davor. I'm responsible for Croatia, but hopefully also will be responsible for Slovenia if we decide to come here and launch as well. So let me talk a bit about what is the experience in the last year of Uber in Croatia. Why is Uber a net contributor to the country? First of all, it's very important for the economy. In Croatia, we have a large unemployment base. But with Uber platform, people are able to, within 2 weeks, open a company, register, get the fiscalization certificate, connect their company with the tax authority servers, get trained, get Uber app, start working, and get cash in their company bank account. So somebody who was unemployed, hard to get a job, within 2 weeks can be a company owner and profitable through the Uber app. Almost no investment needed. We've seen that work in 4 cities already, in Zagreb, in Split, Dubrovnik, and Zadar. People are coming to us from various backgrounds. We have companies that are in other types of services, but also have registered themselves for these type of services and are using Uber as a supplemental income. We are seeing people who chose Uber as a career. They were in either taxi drivers, they have been driving trucks, they have been in the service business. Now they opened a company and became Uber partners. And their lives have changed because it's flexible. You can open the app whenever you want, whenever you have time. You can work through the Uber app as long as you want. When you want to stop, you just log off. That's it. We at Uber provide no guidelines, or we don't force our partners when should they work. And all costs to them are variable. As Rob mentioned, there is no fixed cost for a partner to pay for Uber services. It is also very important for tourism. Uber became a global standard already. Coming to a city without Uber is as if coming to a hotel without Wi-Fi. People expect Uber. In Zagreb, more than 70 different nationalities use Uber. In Split, on the day that we launched, in the first 24 hours, more than 40 nationalities use Uber. When tourists land on the airport, while still they're in the airplane, they open the app and trying to request a ride because they expect Uber to be there. So it's great for the country because tourists demand it. It's also very transparent. They know who will be driving them. They know how much they will pay for a ride. They don't need to have cash. They can pay with their credit cards. One of the important things also is about for the state. There was a lot of discussion, what about taxes? Well, it's very simple. Our partner drivers have companies that register the full price of the ride as their revenue. On that revenue, they need to pay VAT, salary tax of the driver, and profit tax to the country. So for example, in Croatia, they pay all those taxes locally. They also fiscalize every trip in a car. So in real time, the tax authorities know how many trips are being done by Uber partners, at which price, and they can account for the taxes immediately. It is also good for the environment. In cities where Uber is operating for more than a few years, we ran studies which show that one Uber car can replace up to 6 private cars on the vehicle. Now where is that coming from? What we see when Uber comes to a city, that the behavior of people changes. They choose to leave their cars at home and take a car, an Uber car, to the city center. Or they choose to take the Uber car to the nearest station of public transportation system. So after a year, we said, let's see what is the satisfaction of our partners and riders in Zagreb. We commissioned a third-party study to do a market survey. The company talked to more than 1,600 partner drivers and riders, and these were the results. 65% of our partners use Uber as an alternative source of income. So they have other jobs, or their companies are doing also other activities. This is just to increase their earnings. More than 90% of them said they love the flexibility. They can open up the app whenever they have time. You have a person that has a company selling screws, nuts and bolts, but he has only 4 to 5 meetings a day. So he has 3 to 4 hours each day, which he spends on the Uber platform making more money for his company. Also, almost 90% of the people said if there was no Uber, they could either not pay their monthly utilities or they would need to take a loan just to survive. Uber allows them to get more money, to earn more money, in the legal way, paying all the taxes. Also, 90% of them said they would recommend Uber to other partners. I never saw a company in such high level of satisfaction of people who work through that platform. If you look at the other side about the riders, why riders like us? We know that 55% of them have their own car, but they choose to use Uber for private occasions or also business occasions. We know that more than 65% of them use Uber to get to a public transportation system. So instead of taking a car to the center of the city, they take Uber to get to the tram station, and then they take the tram to enter the city. They also use Uber in different occasions, to get to school, college, even to go out on the weekends. They don't need to worry about parking. They don't need to worry about if they enjoy a glass of wine. It's safe, it's transparent, it's reliable. Also, we talked to a lot of parents. They use Uber to send their kids to after-school events because they know where their children are, they know who is driving them, and they can follow them through the application. In each point of time, they know where their child is in which car, because they can follow them through the GPS system, through the app, which is obviously very important to them. That is it for now.
Najlepša hvala, Robi, thanks so much. Morda preden gremo naprej na vprašanja in odgovore, če lahko na kratko strnem, kaj ste oba povedala. Najprej to, da je Uber danes prisoten že v več kot 50 mestih po vsem svetu, med drugim tudi v 21 državah članicah Evropske unije. Do sedaj smo naredili oziroma omogočili več kot 2 milijarde voženj po vsem svetu, samo v Evropi govorimo o milijonih voženj oziroma o milijonih potnikih in seveda o ponudnikih prevoza. Kar je zelo pomembno je to, da prek naše aplikacije, ki je zelo enostavno za uporabo, veš vse vnaprej. Veš, kdo te bo vozil, veš, kje te bo vozil, ker aplikacija sama izračuna optimalno pot do vašega cilja in veš, koliko boš plačal. Tako da ni v bistvu nobenih skrivnosti in velja popolna transparentnost. Vsa plačila so brezgotovinska, kar pomeni, da so 100% sledljiva, kar nam omogoča davčne in vse druge sorabe. In to se nam zdi izjemno pomembno. V Sloveniji, tako kot drugod po Evropi, bi storitve prek Uberjeve platforme opravljeni licencirani ponudniki prevozov. Govorimo seveda o podjetjih oziroma samostojnih podjetnikih, ki imajo ustrezno licenco za prevoz potnikov in izpolnjujejo najstrožje varnostne in vse ostale standarde. Zelo pomembno je, da Uber dejansko pomaga državam, da poberajo več davkov. Prav s to digitalno platformo nobena transakcija ne ostane skrita. In mi imamo zelo uspešna partnerstva prav na področju davčnega sodelovanja s številnimi evropskimi državami, tudi Švedsko in Estonijo. Države prepoznajo v nas to, da lahko v bistvu s neposrednim prenosom podatkov sledijo vsem transakcijam in to je seveda za njih še kako pomembno, pa tudi za nas. Mogoče še ena stvar, ki je zelo pomembna, je ta, da smo že eno leto prisotni tudi na Hrvaškem, kjer smo aktivni v 4 mestih, poleg Zagreba tudi v Dalmaciji. Uber je izjemnega pomena ne samo za Hrvaškem, ampak za turizem v vsem svetu. Danes, kot je Davor omenil, Uber ni več trend, Uber je trend. V prvih 24 urah je samo v Splitu uporabilo našo aplikacijo čez 40 različnih nacionalnosti. Kot je Davor lepo povedal, marsikateri turist pravi, da je priti v mesto brez Uberja tako, kot da prideš v hotel brez Wi-Fi. Turisti pričakujejo transparentnost, ne želijo, da jih nekdo 3-krat vodi okrog cilja, ampak da jih po optimalni poti pripelje varno in zanesljivo do končne destinacije. Kar je še pomembno je to, da Uberjeva platforma spodbuje gospodarsko rast v vseh lokalnih okoljih, kjer je Uber danes prisoten. Na Hrvaškem, kot je povedal Davor in kot je podaril Robi, vsak mesec dobimo več kot 500 različnih aplikacij od ljudi oziroma samostojnih podjetnikov in podjetij, ki si želijo popravljati prevoze prek Uberjeve platforme. Kaj je čar, kar se njih tiče? Popolna fleksibilnost. Delaš kadarkoli hočeš in kolikor hočeš. Nimaš nobenih fiksnih stroškov, nobene mesečne naročnine, ničesar. Ko se odločiš, da bi delal, enostavno delaš. Aplikacija pa potem na pameten način povezuje tebe s tvojim najbližjim potencialnim potnikom. Ti veš, koga voziš, on ve, s kom se vozi. In na koncu oba ocenita drug drugega. In to je sistem zaupanja, ki se je izkazal za izjemno učinkovitega. V Zagrebu, kot smo omenili, je poprečna ocena partnerja 4,8, kar je ena izmed najvišjih poprečnih ocen v Evropi. In na to smo izjemno ponosni. Kar se tiče Slovenije, tukaj, tako kot v drugih evropskih državah, želimo ponuditi storitve, ki bodo licencirane prek partnerjev, ki bodo bodisi podjetja ali pa samostojni podjetniki, ki izpolnjujejo vse zakonske in ostale predpise. Je pa seveda za prihod novih poslovnih modelov in sodelovalnega ter digitalnega gospodarstva nasploh potrebno, da država, pa ne govorimo tukaj samo o Sloveniji, ampak tudi številnih drugih evropskih držav, modernizira svojo zakonodajo. In sicer v skladu z Evropsko agendo o sodelovanju gospodarstva, ki jo je Evropska komisija izdala v juniju. V njej Evropska komisija prepoznala izjemen socialni, ekonomski in okoljski potencial sodelovanega gospodarstva in naložila državam članicam, da prilagodijo svojo zakonodajo tako, da bodo lahko omogočali razcvet sodelovanega in digitalnega gospodarstva. Na tem področju ima Uber ogromno izkušenj, ker je vodilni igralec na področju urbane mobilnosti po vsem svetu. In pripravljeni smo pomagati svojim nasvetih in izkušnjami od drugod. Kaj pa bi radi naredili tukaj v Ljubljani oziroma v Sloveniji? Predvsem bi radi spostavili 2 storitve, obe seveda licencirani. Prva je Uber X, o kateri smo danes slišali že veliko. To je najbolj popularna Uberjeva storitev v Evropi in storitev, ki radite tudi na Hrvaškem. Druga, povsem edinstvena storitev in edina takšna v Evropi, pa bi bila storitev Uber Ljubljana, ki bi bila popolnoma brezogljična, kar pomeni, da bi se izvajala izključno z električnimi avtomobili. To storitev bi izvajali v partnerstvu s mestno občino Ljubljana in v bistvu bi na ta način počastili dejstvo, da je Ljubljana to leto Evropska zelena prestolnica. Toliko z moje strani za enkrat. Če bo še kakršnokoli vprašanje v zvezi s prevodom oziroma posebnimi izrazi, smo vam seveda z veseljem na voljo. Sedaj pa predlagam, da začnemo z vašimi vprašanji. Izvolite. Če lahko poveste.
Mladina, what is the difference between private hire vehicle services and taxi services, and why is it important? And maybe another question, what do you expect from the municipality of Ljubljana in exchange for Uber?
Sure. Should I speak into here, or you want me to hold the microphone? Sure, it's a great question, and this is one that we get often. I think the key difference, if you go to most European capitals or most cities around the world, there's a recognition of two unique types of transportation. The first, as most of you know, and many people grow up knowing, is taxi. And that experience is unique because it's hailed anonymously. It's a public experience. It's a public utility in a sense. You can stand on the street and wave down a taxi. You can arrive at the airport and get a taxi off of the street. And it's not something that you really order directly. And those providers are subject to benefits. For example, being able to driving in public bus lanes, being able to offer their services at taxi ranks where only they can park. There are also providers which operate under the so-called private hire framework. And this is something that exists in many cities around the world. In London is a great example with a very large industry called the minicab industry, which is suited towards pre-booked services or e-hailed services, meaning that you can't wave the driver down off the street. The car is not yellow. It's not an anonymous service. You are contacting a service provider in advance to book a trip, and that provider is providing you with a vehicle or transportation in an unmarked vehicle, which is more suitable to some people's needs, whether it's because they're attending a business event, they want to travel to the airport, they want something booked in advance. And so there are two frameworks for this. The idea is to enable passengers to have more choice. Ultimately, it's about consumer choice. And Uber tends to operate in the latter framework.
I'm sorry, I meant why is it important to you? Why is it important to
So ultimately for Uber, as we're a marketplace, we don't own vehicles and we don't employ the drivers. What we are trying to do is providing access to as many people as possible to leverage our platform. And the unique aspect of private hire is that you can do that with your own personal vehicle. So for example, Davor mentioned that in Zagreb, most of the partners use Uber on a part-time basis, despite the fact that in Slovenia, our partners may have a professional transportation license, they'll have to, but they can use their own vehicle, which means that you don't have to convert your personal family leave vehicle, which you use to take your kids to school or drive around, to a yellow taxi with a light on it with a taxi meter, because you want to use your own personal vehicle. So you still have a license to provide it from the state. You don't have to invest more money in converting your vehicle. It passes the required safety tests. And you can provide service through a smartphone application, which replicates, in fact, probably provides better transparency than mechanisms like a taxi meter, which were designed to facilitate an anonymous transaction. So if you go back to that example, standing on the street, hailing a car off the street, you don't know who that driver is. The driver doesn't know who you are. So it's extremely important to use something like a taxi meter. It's important that you have all the fares listed in large letters on the side of the car. But it's 2016. We have smartphones now. We can do that through a smartphone application. Before you get in the car, your credit card is registered. The driver with Uber has a list of their criminal background check, their driving record check, their driver's license check. It's the most transparent interaction we've ever seen in the mobility industry. And if we allow people to do that in their private vehicles, we open up the opportunity to a much larger percentage of the population. I'll give you an example. In a city like Prague, there are 10,000 taxis. So people could historically say, well, this is the opportunity. There's 10,000 taxis. That's the mobility solution for Prague. There are over 1 million personal vehicles. And many of those people who own those vehicles want to provide services like Uber. And by using this private hire framework, we open up the opportunity to a much larger segment of the population.
It's also quite important to say that Robbie mentioned is the taxi meter. We believe the application provides better transparency. And I give you an example. When I would go to another city that I never visited before, I would take a taxi and I would not know where am I going, in what type of destination or what was the route. In the Uber app, you know what is the route. And in the case that the route was not optimal, the route was recorded. And you as a rider can always check and you can ask, was this my optimal route? If it was not, if the driver took you on a round trip, we would know that. And we would adjust your fare as if you went through the optimal route. And that is a mechanism that would always encourage drivers to take the optimal route so that you pay the least amount possible to get from A to B. That is not possible with the old technology, for example, as taxi. And to answer the second question about partnership with the city of Ljubljana, we are working on a number of partnerships with different cities around our region because we want to work together with the cities. We want to provide additional services to the cities, and I think Ljubljana is a great place because it is the green capital of Europe currently. It is the best place to launch a fully electric service. This is what we would like to discuss with the city. This is what we hope, if we do launch one day, this will be one of the services as Boris mentioned. We are working with other cities in different types of partnership. For example, in Zagreb, we are together organizing different large conferences to bring a large audience to Zagreb for different conferences, for big concert events, etc.
Najlepša hvala. Bi se prosil, da naslednji spraševalc dobi mikrofon.
Hello. Do the Uber driver in Zagreb have all the licenses and everything what they need?
Thank you. The laws in Croatia are different. In Slovenia, there is private hire of vehicle or rent a car with a driver is not recognized. In Croatia, the legislation is different. There is the activity of rent a car with a driver that the whole industry of tourism is operating within for the last 25 years, where they don't need to provide licensed service to the transportation type of license that they would need to do in Slovenia. So the legislation is different from country to country. And when Uber comes to a country, we always adapt the local legislation. First on the fee, at 25% variable fee is an Uber standard, and we are considering that one over here as well. I'll let Robbie answer to that.
Yeah, and to your question about regulation, and I think it's an important one and really ties into why we're here today and what we're talking about, and that is that innovation outpaces regulation. And we've seen over the last 5 years, it's abundantly clear to the users of Uber, to the companies who provide service through Uber, and to most of the cities that we operate in, the value that Uber is delivering. It's also very clear that this is a service which regulations, particularly at the European Union level, didn't contemplate. They contemplated services that have existed for the last 50 years, and certainly not services that are already here that will serve us for the next 50 years. And so I think it's important to see that over the last 12 to 24 months, we've seen a wave across Europe of countries recognizing the benefits of these services and moving to regulate them. And I referenced some of them in Estonia, Lithuania. We see developments in Slovakia. We hope in Croatia, and we hope to see something like this happen in Slovenia. To your question specifically about bans, I would encourage everyone in the room. I think one of the interesting discussions we often have is how the media reports around bans that we're not aware of or that we don't actually see. And some of the countries you mentioned, Spain, Italy, France, we're still active in every single one of these cities, every single one of these countries. And I think where the conversation gets confusing, and maybe to your question to Davor about Croatia, is that each country has its own regulation, right? If you think about the presentation today, we're talking about using an app to request a car from someone who lives there, is licensed by the state with a vehicle to drive themselves, to pay that person to take them from point A to point B. It's very simple, really. But in 2016, we find that these regulations, country to country, even in the European Union, are very, very different, even from Croatia to Slovenia. And this is the major effort that I think the European Commission is working to address, is how can something so simple be regulated in such a fragmented way across what is meant to be a single market? And this is something that we're very excited about. We do feel we're participating and contributing to that dialogue. And we do feel, to be honest, that the bulk of markets in the European Union and in Europe in general are moving to embrace and adopt these services, not ban or prohibit them.
Dodal samo še ena zadeva. Ko preverjate te trditve o prepovedi oziroma podobnih stvareh, lahko zelo enostavno pogledate na Uberjevo aplikacijo in vnesete recimo ime mesta, Pariz, in vidite, ali so tam Uberjevi partnerji aktivni. In na vseh teh mestih je Uber aktiven, Uber ni nikjer prepovedan, tako da lahko to zelo enostavno in poceni preverite že z lastno aplikacijo.
Just about to say that. Just open the app, go to Paris, go to Berlin, go to Munich, go to Brussels. You will see Uber partner drivers on the road any point in time there.
Ne samo, da Pariz ni prepovedal Uberja, Pariz je eno izmed naših največjih tržišč v Evropi in na svetu in v bistvu prvo mesto, v katerem smo začeli v Evropi.
Sorry, can I just check? It was Uber thought that was banned in Paris and you had to pay some fees.
Sure. So I think, to your question, again, in Western Europe, what we've seen in early, let's say 2013, 2014 was resistance and a lack of understanding of how Uber worked. And in many cases, we evolved that service. For example, we provided in the United States a service called P2P or peer-to-peer, which is not the service that we're here talking about today, because we've recognized that in Europe and many member states, the regulations simply don't accommodate that. And that's why we haven't launched yet in Slovenia, because we've actually recognized that local legislation, regardless of whether or not if it's not progressive enough yet, it's not our role to come and force that. We will work proactively before we enter, try to contribute to a dialogue to ensure that that happens, and should that happen, we'll come launch. Historically in Western Europe, I think what we've seen is that most governments and regulators early on didn't understand our service. We worked hard to educate them about the benefits of the service, and in many cases we evolved our service. France would be a great example. We provided one type of service. A year ago, we evolved that service to meet the desires of the regulator, and that, I think, informs our strategy for new markets, such as Slovenia.
Pomembno se zavedati, da ima, kot je Rob povedal, Uber različne storitve na različnih tržiščih. Kot smo omenili, smo danes prisotni že v 80 državah in to pomeni v 80 pravnih okvirih. In jasno, da se storitev v vsaki posamezni državi prilagaja zakonodaji. Ampak še enkrat naj poudarim, da je tehnologija vedno korak pred zakoni, še posebej v zadnjih letih lahko rečemo, da je ta korak zelo velik. In zato se želi Evropska komisija s temi smernicami v zvezi s sodelovanjem gospodarstvom doseči, da bo ta razkorak čim manjši ali pa da sploh več ne bo. Najlepša hvala.
There were also court rules in the United States of America regarding workers' rights. Uber should employ them, taxi drivers, and there are some lawsuits now in Great Britain. So what is your comment to that?
Sure. Well, I'm not intimately familiar, obviously, as a business leader. I'm really focused on the operations. But what I can say is that a hallmark of the Uber platform is the fact that it's a marketplace. And if you speak to people who use Uber, the partners in any city we operate in, and we've shared some statistics from Croatia, the reason they use Uber is because they can choose their own time. The reason they use Uber is because it facilitates entrepreneurial activity. There is no set requirement to show up at 9 a.m. and drive till 12 p.m. or 1 a.m. It's about flexibility, it's about independence, and it's about giving people the ability to run their own business how they see fit, when and where they want to do so. And so in terms of the specific legal environment in the United States, I can't comment on that. But what I can say is that as a business, the entire opportunity for Uber and marketplaces like Uber is dependent on the fact that people want that flexibility of work. And that's why Uber has become so popular with partners, with business entities, with transportation providers, because they want that flexibility. And many of them use other services. So Davor mentioned examples where they may run airport transfers for 5 to 7 to 8 hours a day, but then they have vehicles sitting in parking lots or on driveways doing nothing the rest of the day, and they use Uber to supplement their income.
Yeah. Also one comment there is, Uber is from a rider point of view always the same. UberX is, if you come to Zagreb, you go to Split or any other city, hopefully Ljubljana. From a rider point of view, it will be the same. But from a driver point of view, it's going to be different. Because the driver, depending whether he's Croatian, Slovenian, or any other type of company, would need to be structured differently according to the local laws. Also discussion whether workers or drivers in US want to become workers is an irrelevant discussion for our part of the world. Because here drivers would be employed by partner companies or would be sole entrepreneurs. So by definition, they would be already an employees of a company that is partner of Uber.
Mogoče bi samo še enkrat poudaril odstotek Uberjevih partnerjev na Hrvaškem, ki bi priporočilo Uber za svojim kolegom oziroma komorkoli. 90% Uberjevih partnerjev bi priporočilo delo prek Uberjeve platforme tudi drugim. In danes, kot je omenil že Robi, opravlja delo prek Uberjeve platforme že nekaj milijonov ljudi po vsem svetu. Povsem prostovoljno, ker jim to ustreza. Ne samo zaradi fleksibilnosti, ampak tudi drugih pomembnih razlogov, o katerih smo govorili. Mogoče še kdo drug? Na drugi strani?
I was just interested about what you just mentioned, that there are some drivers also are workers at another firm or work some other thing. And I got that correctly, 65% of drivers in Croatia. Is there any way how Uber checks that people are not overtired, that they're not working over 10 hours a day? And especially if you're combining people who are actually workers on other workplaces, so how to ensure that basically people, drivers are not overworked?
So I can talk about Croatia. So what I said was 65% of our partner drivers use Uber platform as a supplemental type of income. It does not necessarily mean that they are employed somewhere else. It means that 65% or more percent of their income comes from a different service. They could be doing the same work, but either through a different platform or directly with clients. For example, some have contracts with hotels. They drive for hotels to the airport. They don't have a ride. They log on to the Uber platform. Now, in Croatia, there is a law that very clearly describes where a person can work and for how many hours. If they are employed for one company, there is always a certain amount of hours on top how much they can work. And work inspections are always checking partner drivers as well. So they need to comply. They also need to submit every month a total day-by-day registration of how many hours the person has worked, which is an administrative burden, but it's a reality. So every month, every employer, for each of the employees, needs to register this. And this is, in a way, a check of how many also hours drivers in Croatia can spend on the platform. Because fines, or risk of a fine of spending more hours than that is very high. And it's very hard for a small business to justify that risk.
When applying to Uber application as a rider, you have to upload some documents. I don't know. When do you check, or do you check all the documents that have been uploaded?
I mean, for a driver, not for a rider.
Yes.
So
All licenses and everything.
yes, when Robbie was mentioning what kind of documentation people need, there is a person that checks every single document, but also compare the documents. Driving license with the ID, picture with the picture, company registration, etc. So every single document is checked by a live person, and every driver is met by a member of our staff. They have an interview and they have a training.
And it's also worth probably mentioning that obviously this information is stored on our servers. So around the world today, we are the largest facilitator, certainly, of transportation partnerships around the world. So over 2 billion rides certified. And for each one of those trips, historically and forever, we have data records that comply with local privacy laws, but also allow us to ensure that when you take a trip, even 6 months or 6 years after a partner joins, that partner's information is available, it's on our system, and where there are requirements for that partner to renew information, let's say a driver's license come up for renewal, that our system will actually notify them, hey, it's now time to upload your renewed and updated driver's license. The benefit of being a technology company.
Mogoče še ena prednost tega, da smo tehnološko podjetje, je ta, da imaš celo možnost, da med vožnjo deliš svojo možnost s svojimi prijatelji in družino. Kar pomeni, da jih lahko prek aplikacije obvestiš, kje se nahajaš, kdaj boš uspel, kam prihajaš in tako naprej. Skratka, da se tudi na ta način dodatno zagotavlja ta varnost. Morda še kdo?
Yeah, can you say something about the prices? Because the price for the partner is changing regarding to the needs or demands. So it's not actually the cheapest ride, would be also the
So there's I think two really important principles, and I didn't get into it in my presentation, but it's really important of our vision for cities, which is one, Uber's goal in every market we operate in, and we have a track record of doing this, is lowering the cost of transportation over time by using technology. And if you look at any of the cities that we've entered, we've done this in Croatia, we are lowering the cost of transportation. And what we find is that when we first enter a market, our system, while relatively efficient to existing providers, is not perfectly efficient. We do not the most trips per hour. The drivers aren't always utilized because our system is still being optimized. We're still expanding our coverage in the city, and our technology and our algorithms are still optimizing how people in a city, for example, like Ljubljana, move around. What's the fastest way to get from one point of the city to the other? And that means that we're not yet as efficient. What we do with our platform over time is we bring down the cost of taking trips, which means more people ride, which means drivers do more trips per hour, which means that we can actually reduce the average cost of a trip while increasing the amount of money that a partner makes in a given hour. And across Central and Eastern Europe, we have a track record of doing this. We've cut prices as many as 3 times in many cities that we operate in, while maintaining or actually increasing the level of earnings of partners. And this is an incredibly important aspect of what Uber does and why its platform is more efficient. I'll give you an example of a metric that we look at, which is utilization. In a given 60 minutes, what percentage of time does a partner actually spend with a passenger in the back seat earning a fare? That's something that we look at very often and try to move. If it starts at 50 or 55%, we try to move that to 70 or 75%. And doing so, that allows us to reduce the cost of the trip. To your question about, I think your question was about dynamic pricing. Again, as a technology platform, we think that technology is best suited to match supply and demand. And our efforts with what we call surge, is dynamic pricing, says that when we see one area of the city is underserved and there is a lot of demand, we temporarily increase prices, and our partners see this. So, for example, a group of drivers could be at one end of the city, and the entire city could be at the other end requesting a car. We will temporarily increase prices automatically. This is not done manually through our algorithms to that area of the city. The partners in the city are incentivized to drive over to that area to provide service. Supply meets demand, and the cost of the trip comes down.
A very live example from Zagreb. We did a price correction in April in Zagreb. We decreased prices by 25% on average. From that day on, number of trips that partner drivers were doing went up 40%. As an effect, meant they are driving for 25% lower average fares, but their earnings went up. And it was counterintuitive for them, but they see that. For example, today we are doing a 20% price correction on the Dalmatian coast, and we will see the same effects in a few days. But now drivers already know when prices go down, they start to make more money. And that is the great thing about technology. And where does it come from? It comes from the amount of time they spend waiting for another passenger, or the distance they need to cover to get to a new passenger. In both of those instances, they're not making money, they're actually losing money. So what we try to do is to make them have a passenger on the back seat as many times as possible. We also have a feature in the app which we call forward dispatch, which means the application knows where a trip will end, the exact location and time, So they can, a new passenger, a new rider can get that car even before that car becomes available. For the driver, that means once he drops off a rider, the next rider is waiting for him around the corner. So he doesn't have to spend time waiting for a new rider. He's just driving all the time and making money. That is what technology can provide.
Mogoče samo še en pomemben podatek glede dinamičnih cen. Vsak uporabnik je osebni obveščen vnaprej, kar pomeni, da mora potrditi že vnaprej, da se strinja s tem, da je recimo, ne vem, ceno v Zagrebu za 30% višja. Skratka, nobenega presenečenja ni v koncu. Samo, če se s tem strinja in to potrdi, se prevoz uporabi. Tako da je v bistvu ta obveščenost vnaprej izjemno pomembna, ker želimo biti popolnoma transparentni. Mogoče samo še ena zadeva glede razlike med taksi in to storitvijo private car vehicle. Seveda govorimo o storitvi najem vozila z voznikom. To je storitev, ki se v taksiju razlikuje v marsičem. Pri taksiju, kot so povedali, moja kolega, se uporablja taksimeter, ki sproti izračunava ceno, pri najemu vozila z voznikom so pa vsi elementi vožnje dogovorjeni vnaprej. Kdo bo vozil, kje bo vozil, koliko bo stala vožnja, kdaj boš prišel na cilj. Uberjevi partnerji ne uživajo privilegijo, ki jih uživajo sicer taksisti, kar pomeni, da nimajo pravice do uporabe hitrih pasov, da nimajo pravice do uporabe taksi postajališč, da nimajo pravice do tega, da te nekdo na cesti ustavi in ga vzameš, ker se prav vse vožnje naročijo izključno prek aplikacij. Tako da to je ta pomembna razlika. Najem vozila z voznikom seveda ni nobena revolucionarna novost. To je sestavni del vsake turistične industrije, žal pa pri nas tega zakonodaja ne ureja. Zdaj pa, če dovolite, mogoče samo še eno vprašanje, potem pa, če ste se to bi zaključili na našo konferenco in lahko nadaljujemo pogovor ena na ena s Tavorjem in pa Robin.
Uber in Croatia introduced also payments with cash. Is that something that you would consider in Slovenia as well? Because we know that Slovenian market is quite similar to Croatia.
Yeah. Cash payment is something that we are now doing globally. We rolled out almost 30 countries where you can pay by cash. It's also important to say that nothing changes. Even by paying with cash, still every trip is recorded and it's very transparent. So for the also tax authorities is the same in Croatia. Now why we did it? Almost only 40% of people in Croatia have access to credit cards and they were asking for it. They said, we don't have credit card, but we can use Uber. So we let them have it.
Super, najlepša hvala. Mogoče samo še eno pojasnilo, ker se tiče teh omejitev pri delu in tako naprej. Zakaj? Če dalje več državnih programov, ne govorim samo o davčnih upravah, ampak tudi ministrskih zadev in socialno, želijo sodelovati z Uberjem in podobnimi platformami. Enostavno zato, ker digitalni platformi, kakšna je naša, nič ne uide. In ko oni preverjajo, koliko časa recimo na dan nekdo vozi in seštevajo njegovo delovno aktivnost prek Uberja, mogoče še druge platforme oziroma službe, točno vejo, koliko vožnje opravijo prek Uberja in kdaj. Isto je pri plačilu, kar pomeni, da nobeno plačilo ne mora biti davčne upravi. In s tem zagotavljamo popolno transparentnost in tudi večjamo varnost in kakovost storitev na trgu. Najlepša hvala vsem, da ste prišli. Zelo veseli smo, da smo lahko te stvari izpeljali danes. Upam, da se malo spet vidimo. Zdaj pa predlagam, da za vsa dodatna vprašanja se obrnete Mati, našemu PR-ovcu, ki bo organiziral intervjuje z Robijem Davorjem.